So yeah, let's talk a little bit about life after Roe. As Norman said, about a year ago today, Roe versus Wade was overturned. Praise the Lord. After 49 years of living under Roe versus Wade, which is of course wrongly decided from the very beginning as the worst case of legislating from the bench that you can possibly imagine, Roe versus Wade was finally overturned. What a great victory for life that was. Not just in South Dakota. Our trigger law went into effect in South Dakota, and so abortion was prohibited on that very day. But across the country too, where we saw pro-life laws kick in, a couple of them across the country. There were maybe 12 other states that had trigger laws in place. And so it was a really monumental victory, something that doesn't happen every day. And I want to draw your attention particularly to, before we get there, here's what we're going to talk about a little bit. So we'll kind of have to gather around the screen a little bit to see some of this stuff, because there is some important information that I want you to take note of. This is sort of the timeline of where we've been over the last year. So June 2022 was when Dobbs versus Jackson came down and overturned Roe versus Wade. And then there's been some votes along the way, and there's been some court cases along the way. So August 2022 is when Kansas voted on a measure. Then there were a bunch of other elections that took place in November of 2022. And then 2023, 2024, you are here, that's right now. And then November of 2024, there's going to be more votes, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So Dobbs versus Jackson, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. You know, a lot of times when these sort of monumental things take place, you kind of like remember where you were at the time that occurred. And I don't know if that announcement is like that for you, but it is for me. We were hanging out at home. We were kind of expecting this court case to come down. You know, we kept thinking it was going to be like the week before, and the week before that, and the week before that. So we're just watching. And finally, this day comes, and we kind of like suspect that this is going to be the day, and the people watching the court kind of suspect this is going to be the day. So we're sitting at home. I stayed home from the office to watch the announcement. And sure enough, you know, the news kicks in, and the Supreme Court had overturned Roe versus Wade and Dobbs v. Jackson. But as I was sitting there reading through that case after it was announced, I had it pulled up on my computer. There's something very great, but also something very awesome that I want to take stock of, and that is the central holding. The Constitution does not confer a right to an abortion. We've known that for 49 years. Roe and Casey are overruled, and the authority to regulate abortion is returned to the people and their elected representatives. The authority to regulate abortion is returned to the people and their elected representatives. That's us. We the people. That is an incredible, awesome responsibility to step up and defend life. But that's on our shoulders now. You know, when Roe was the law, there was a lot of, well, we'll do this, but there's only so much that we can do, because if we do any more, the courts are going to overrule us. We'll never be able to pass a law and have it withstand court scrutiny. That's not the case anymore. Now the responsibility to defend these innocent lives is squarely upon our own shoulders. And it's something that we all need to take very, very seriously. All right, so that was Dobbs. We all know Dobbs overturned Roe. Let's talk a little bit about some of the elections that we've seen since Dobbs overturned Roe versus Wade. I'll just tell you at the onset, none of this is really good news. Spoiler alert. The pro-lifers across the country haven't exactly been winning these issues. We had a huge, huge win when the Supreme Court overturned Roe, but let's dive in a little bit to what's happened since then and what we're going to do in response. So the first state I want to talk about is Kansas. And you probably heard a little bit about Kansas. Kansas voted on the value them both vote almost immediately after Roe versus Wade was overturned. This was in, I believe it was in August. August is when Kansas, so here we are, yep, August 2022, shortly after June. So there's a lot of scrutiny on Kansas, a lot of attention on Kansas. And the fever pitch was kind of turned way up because the Supreme Court had just overturned Roe, and that gave a lot of momentum to the pro-abortion side. So what happened in Kansas is different than what we see in South Dakota. Their Supreme Court in Kansas had came out with a decision that said that in Kansas, they had a constitutional right under their state constitution to an abortion. And so the Value Them Both campaign was to say, well, we're going to basically override that ruling with a constitutional amendment and allow the legislature to regulate abortion. So that's what was on the ballot. Are we going to overturn this court ruling that says that the state can't regulate abortion and kind of dial some of this back? So in Kansas, a yes vote supported amending the Kansas Constitution to state that nothing in the state constitution creates a right to an abortion. And a no vote would have overturned that court case that we were talking about. So there was a lot of money that was poured in to this ballot measure. The Value Them Both campaign, the pro-life side, raised $6 million. And the Kansas for Constitutional Freedom, that's what they called it, that's the pro-abortion side, they raised $7.4 million. So $6 million versus $7.4 million poured into this. And here's the result. A pro-life vote is a yes vote, and it was 41%. And I want to remind you too, the partisan makeup of Kansas is very similar to South Dakota. It's very similar. And yet, on the Value Them Both, which would have allowed it didn't even say what the regulation would be. It didn't require the legislature to do any certain thing. It just allowed the legislature to regulate abortion rather than it just being blanket legalized. 41%. Not good news, folks. Not good news at all. So here's some reaction. I want to show you the reaction of both sides of the campaign because I actually think it can be instructive when you hear what both sides say about sort of what happened. So let's read through this together because I think we can learn a lot from this. Okay, the Value Them Both coalition, that's the pro-lifers, remember, who supported the amendment, said in a statement, quote, over the last 6 months, Kansas endured an onslaught of misinformation from radical left organizations that spent millions of out-of-state dollars to spread lies about the Value Them Both amendment. Sadly, the mainstream media propelled the left's false narrative, contributing to the confusion that misled Kansas about the amendment. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening in South Dakota today, but I think what you're going to find is when you hear things like millions of dollars flowed into that state on the pro-abortion side, that the same thing is going to happen here in South Dakota, that the media will sort of align with the pro-abortion side to attack the pro-lifers and to spread the pro-abortion narrative. I think you're going to find that sort of thing happens in South Dakota. And that there's just a lot of confusion. There's a lot of people being misled. So that's what the pro-lifers said about what happened in Kansas. Now let's hear what the other side said, the pro-abortionists. Kansas for Constitutional Freedom. The committee registered in opposition to the amendment said, quote, this is truly a historic day for Kansas and for America. We won the historic battle to protect women's constitutional rights, and we blocked the dangerous anti-abortion amendment. Freedom has prevailed. Freedom has prevailed. The constitutional rights of Kansas women have been protected. So just take note of that. Look at how they sort of wrap their, abortion through 9 months language in things like freedom, constitutional rights, women's autonomy, those sorts of things. Okay, now Michigan. Now Michigan's an interesting state. Michigan You can see up in the upper right-hand corner, that's Gretchen Whitmer. I'm sure you've probably heard of her before. So in Michigan, they had Proposal 3, provided for a state constitutional right to reproductive freedom. And the term reproductive freedom was defined as the right to make and effectuate decisions about all matters relating to pregnancy, including but not limited to prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, and abortion care, which is what they're really after, miscarriage management, and infertility care. So in that case, they sort of wrapped up abortion along with all these other things that we all just agree upon that aren't really major, they're not like political issues. Everybody wants good prenatal care, everybody wants good infertility care, miscarriage management, let's say. But then they put abortion in there too. So that's really what the fight was about, abortion. Okay, this is a vote that took place in Michigan. It's like 47 to 47. That column on the left just barely squeaked by. This is actually Trump versus Clinton in 2016. And I want to show you that because you might say, well, this is Michigan. And, there are a bunch of libs over there. And so what does it matter? Why would we even look at Michigan? But it's important to remember that Donald Trump won in Michigan against Hillary Clinton. So this is not something to just be written off. We can learn a lot from what happened in Michigan. All right, so a yes vote in Michigan supported providing a right to what they call reproductive freedom. So again, they're wrapping their language in terms of freedom and all the rest of it, just like they did in Kansas. And a no vote, of course, opposed that constitutional amendment. And the Reproductive Freedom for All Act, which was registered to support the measure, they raised $47.8 million. They spent $46.7 million to pass that. And on the pro-life side, there are a bunch of other groups. Guess what? They raised about $42 million. It's a massive amount of money that went into this ballot measure. And there's the result. The pro-abortion side was the yes vote, 56%. We lost. Even though we got outspent in Michigan, but they raised like a staggering $42 million on the pro-life side, and still got beat pretty big, 56% yes. All right, here's the reaction. A spokesperson for Reproductive Freedom for All, this is the pro-aborts, said today, the people of Michigan voted to restore the reproductive rights they had for 50 years. Proposals 3, I should explain that. So there was a law that was passed in Michigan back in 1931. And when Roe was overturned by the Dobbs decision, there was some question whether that 1931 law banned abortion in the state. And so that's why they spun up this measure in Michigan to say affirmatively that they will have legalized abortion. So that's what that was all about. Okay, so today the people of Michigan voted to restore the reproductive rights they've had for 50 years. Proposal 3 passage marks a historic victory for abortion access in our state and in our country. And Michigan has paved the way for future efforts to restore the rights and protections of Roe versus Wade nationwide. They paved the way, not just for Michigan, but for other places across the country. Somebody somewhere has got to draw the line in the sand and put an end to this. Here's the reaction from the pro-lifers. This is the president of Right to Life in Michigan, said, "We are deeply saddened by the tragic passage of the most dangerous ballot proposals to face Michigan voters in history. Proposal 3. Here we go again. Out-of-state billionaires from New York and California funded a disinformation campaign to lure voters. Large majority of free press mounted an unprecedented deluge of one-sided advocacy designed to pass Proposal 3. This was a shameful disservice to our democratic process and Michigan voters seeking the truth." You see the common threads there? Lots of money coming in from out of state, misinformation spread to the people, allies in the corporate left media pushing the pro-abortion narrative. And that's what we see all over the state. So I'm not going to go too deep into these other ones, but I do want you to see what's been happening in the other states. So in California, there was Proposition 1 to amend the Constitution to establish the right to reproductive freedom. The proponents, the pro-abortion proponents, raised $16.7 million in California. And you can see the result there. The yes side was the pro-abortion side. And they just dominated in California. Here's Montana. Okay, now this is sort of an interesting one. LR 131 was known as the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. So this isn't even saving babies from abortion. This is if the baby is born in like a botched abortion proceeding, that the doctors have to preserve the life of that baby. That's really what they were talking about in Montana. You'd think that'd be very agreeable. Compassion for Montana families, who is the no on this measure, and then Montanans against LR 131. They have reported over $1 million in contributions. There's actually no real organized effort on the pro-life side of that. I don't know what was going on there. Maybe they thought it would be so easy that they could just coast on into victory. I don't know. But even something as agreeable as the Born Alive Infant Protection Act failed in Montana. The no side is the pro-abortion side. The yes side is the pro-life side. We only got 47%. Not good. Okay, now this is Vermont. Look at that result. Proposal 5 added language to the Vermont Constitution stating that an individual's right to personal reproductive autonomy is essential to the liberty and dignity to determine one's own life course. Vermont for reproductive liberty. Look at the difference here. Now, this is different than what we've seen in any of the other states. Vermont for reproductive liberty, they posted a total of $569,000 in contributions. Vermont Right to Life spent $20 million fighting this. The yes vote is, that might be a typo. The yes vote, 76% on the yes side, and the no side, what is that, 20-some%? It's pretty bad. Pretty bad result there. So here's the reality that we're facing. Pro-lifers have yet to win a statewide vote since Roe versus Wade was overturned. We're being outspent like crazy, and the corporate mainstream media is against us in a big way. That's the reality. So here it is, 2023 and 2024. You are here. And there we are having a nice picnic. But here's the reality. Abortion is still happening. And you know what? I like having a nice picnic. We just got a new little table and chairs for the deck. And we love going out there as a family. And oftentimes, we live life, we do things like that. But sometimes I'll go to the Alpha Center. Leslie Under's here. You're all familiar with the Alpha Center here in Sioux Falls. I'll go to the Alpha Center, and you see what goes on there on a daily basis. And then you walk away, and you go to your picnics, and it's easy to just forget. It's easy to forget that this battle is raging on for life every single day in this state. And it's easy for us to forget about it all. But remember, what the Supreme Court said was true. The responsibility is on our shoulders now. And so we cannot forget that abortion is still happening. In South Dakota, today, abortion is still happening. Pills are being sent from all over the world to the state of South Dakota to abort babies in our state. That's literally happening today. And Leslie and Travis is here too. Travis is back there. Travis runs the Pregnancy Health Center out in the Black Hills. And I think they would tell you, in fact, Travis and I were just talking about this before we started, they have not seen a decline in clients. Yeah, there's more at the Alpha Center here in Sioux Falls. It's almost like if you didn't know any better, if you never walked outside the Alpha Center, you might think that Roe was never overturned. That's the reality, even here in South Dakota, of what we're up against. It's the real deal. Okay, so you were here. Abortion is still happening in the state. The fight is upon us here. I want to talk just briefly about some litigation that's taking place on the abortion pill, and then we're going to talk about the ballot measures that are still to come. That maybe will come, maybe won't come. They're fighting in other states to get these things on the ballot, fighting in South Dakota to get a measure on the ballot, so we're going to talk about that. So I don't want to go into too many details here on the mifepristone litigation, but you might have heard recently there was a Texas court that said that the FDA, when they had their authorization for the primary abortion pill, that they did so unlawfully. And so this judge basically struck down that authorization, which would pull the pill from the market. That was then appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. There were some other issues at play too. Another issue in the case was whether or not you can mail these pills. The abortion industry, that's what they want to be able to do. We've seen a dramatic shift over the years, maybe the last 10 years or so, where the abortion industry has really started to focus on pill form chemical abortions. And they can still make a ton of money off of it, and so they want to be able to have women go online, click on a few links, fill out a little bit of information, and have chemical abortion drugs just delivered right to their home. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous, obviously for the baby, but also the mothers. This is not something to be done unsupervised. It's incredibly risky, but the abortion industry wants to foster that market. So that litigation proceeded. Right now, it actually ended up going up to the Supreme Court, not for a full hearing, but just sort of like a preliminary thing. At the end of the day, that's still in litigation. So whether or not that FDA authorization is found to have been unlawful at the time, that's still in litigation. Whether the federal government, whether Joe Biden and his administration can just ship these pills through the mail, that's still in litigation. We don't quite know how that's going to shake out, but it's something definitely to keep an eye on. And I can tell you, the pro-abortionists in Washington, they want to be able to legalize the shipping of these pills all throughout the United States of America. All right, let's talk about some more ballot measures that are on the horizon. You can see these are ballot measures that are in circulation. So like in South Dakota, you have to get a certain amount of petition signatures in order to get a measure on the ballot. That's how that works. And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 states. There's others that are in sort of more informal phases, but there's 6 states here where from different sides of the issue. Some of these might be from the pro-life side, they're trying to change their laws. And then some of these are from the pro-abortion side, where they're trying to change the law to legalize abortion. And you look at that last state in the lower right-hand corner, and that is home sweet home, South Dakota. And so in South Dakota, we are up against this constitutional amendment. The language is on the screen right there. It's pretty short. It's only 3 paragraphs long, but the consequences of that constitutional amendment being written into our state constitution would be absolutely devastating for the life of babies and mothers here in the state of South Dakota. I don't think we've talked about it a little bit. You've probably heard about it before, so I'll just sum it up for you by saying these points. Number 1, that constitutional amendment will legalize painful late-term abortions up to the point of birth. Now it's interesting, you remember when we went through those other states And we saw that the pro-abortionists, they were misleading people, and that the media was aligned with them to discredit pro-lifers when they talked about what the amendment did in their state. That's exactly what we're seeing in South Dakota. To the T, that's what we're seeing. You go out there and you try to say this legalizes late-term abortion up to birth, and you will be called a liar by the pro-abortionists. And many people in this room know that to be true. But I'll just explain this real quick. Look at this first paragraph. Before the end of the first trimester, the state may not regulate a pregnant woman's abortion decision and its effectuation, which must be left to the judgment of the pregnant woman. So the state may not regulate a pregnant woman's abortion decision and its effectuation. That is a blanket prohibition. Effectuation, by the way, it's not defined in here, but it means to bring about. So this is a prohibition on any regulation, on any protection whatsoever related to the bringing about of an abortion. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means here in a second. But that's about as broad, as sweeping of a ban as you can possibly get. Second paragraph, this deals with the second trimester. After the end of the first trimester and until the end of the second trimester, the state may regulate the pregnant woman's abortion decision and its effectuation only in ways that are reasonably related to the physical health of the pregnant woman. So we can only put regulations in place in the second trimester that are related to the physical health of the pregnant woman. That means you can't bring a regulation banning abortion in the second trimester because that's not a regulation reasonably related to the physical health of the mother. So already we're talking about late-term abortion. You know, in the latter part of the second trimester, babies are viable outside the womb, and they're proposing to legalize the termination of those lives. Note something else. It's only in the second trimester that you can enact regulations that are reasonably related to the physical health of the mother. Well, what would that look like? Think about health and safety protections for mothers. You know, regulations to ensure that if there's going to be an abortion, that it's at least done in like an inspected facility by an actual doctor. So that's only legal under their constitutional amendment in the second trimester. You can't have health and safety regulations for mothers, for protections for mothers in the first trimester. That's absolutely nuts. And you have to wonder, why would they do that? And the answer is because they want to be able to ship those abortion pills. And they don't want the legislature, the people, getting in the way of their ability to have a mother just go on the computer, type in a few boxes, and have those pills shipped to her house so the Planned Parenthood can profit off of that. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous for mothers, but that's what they want. Okay, now the third paragraph. After the end of the second trimester, now this looks a little different. The state may regulate or prohibit abortion. All right, well that sounds better. The state may regulate or prohibit abortion, except when abortion is necessary in the medical judgment of the woman's physician to preserve the life or health of the pregnant woman. So we have to understand that carefully. We have to read these things carefully. So now we can regulate, but there's this big exception, and that's when abortion is necessary in the medical judgment of the woman's physician to preserve the life or health of the pregnant mother. Well, you remember in the second trimester we talked about physical health. Well, this doesn't say physical health anymore. This just says health. That's broader. And if you ask these people, they'll tell you, yeah, of course, this also means mental health. So now we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about, what about mental health? Well, preserving mental health. Preserving a mental state. So, you know, drafting matters. That's why in the legislature, when we pass a bill, we have a committee hearing where you can amend it. We have a floor session where you can amend it. Then it goes to the other chamber where you have another committee hearing where you can amend it, and another floor session where you can amend it. And then it goes to the governor's desk where she can veto it if she wants to. There's none of that here. So these words matter tremendously. So when you're talking about preserving the mental health of the pregnant woman, that can mean that she doesn't even have suicidal ideation yet, that she doesn't even have anxiety or depression yet, that she's just trying to avoid those things. Preserving her mental health. And who gets to decide? That's the important point. It's in the medical judgment of the woman's physician. Well, who's that? In the abortion context, a Planned Parenthood abortionist, in many cases. This is truly late-term abortion through 9 months being proposed to be written into your state constitution. So, what are we going to do about it? That's the question. What are we going to do about it? And, as we were thinking about that a while ago now, oftentimes what you see happen with these ballot measures is, you might hear about them circulating a measure, and so it's like, well, we'll see what happens, and maybe we'll spin up a campaign against it in September or October of 2024, whenever the next general election comes around. That's not good enough for this. The stakes are way, way too high. Countless lives are at stake if this thing is written into our Constitution. So, me and Leslie Unruh and some pro-life friends of ours, we got together and we started the Life Defense Fund. And the Life Defense Fund is leading the way to help defeat this constitutional amendment. And it starts by spreading the word about how truly horrific this thing is and encouraging everybody to decline to sign that petition. So you've got some of the flyers on your tables in front of you. There's also the flyer up here on the screen. This one on the screen is kind of the latest version. And it just lays out some of those points that we just went through. Decline to sign the radical abortion petition. It's too extreme, and here's why. Number one, it legalizes painful, late-term abortions. They will tell you that that's a lie. The media will say that's a lie. But we just went through the language together. You just read it with your own eyes, and you know that it's true. But they will call every single one of the people in this room a liar. Number two, it denies parents the right to know when their underage daughter is seeking an abortion. You remember in that first trimester and in the second trimester? In the first trimester, no regulation whatsoever. The state may not regulate the pregnant woman's abortion decision or the bringing about of an abortion. And in the second trimester, the only regulations related to an abortion can be related to the physical health of the mother. Well, some of the earliest protections that we put into place when Roe versus Wade was overturned as a state were parental notification laws, because parents have a right to know if their minor daughter is being bullied or coerced or threatened into having an abortion. We can't have that law if this is written into our Constitution. So that goes away, and that's important. People like parents' rights. I guess not everybody. I mean, I see that, I don't know if you're familiar with Moms for Liberty. It's kind of a new organization. The Southern Poverty Law Center just designated them as a hate group. So some on the left have gone so far off the rails that they think if you like parental rights, you're a hate group. So I can't say that everybody wants parental rights, but most people do. Number three, jeopardizes the health of women and girls by eliminating basic medical and safety standards for abortion facilities. So that's what we just talked about in the first trimester. No health and safety standards whatsoever. And then finally, allows taxpayer funding of abortion. And it does that because we have some statutory laws on our books today that prevent government funds, your tax dollars, from going to an abortion. But if you can't regulate anything about the abortion decision or its effectuation, those protections go away too. So that is what we're up against. It's real, it's serious. Many people in this room have been out on the front lines trying to educate as many people as we can about how extreme that this measure is. And sometimes it seems like we're not all made for the front lines, but I think right now we kind of need everybody on the front lines. I mean, that's the point that we're at. We cannot, if the people in this room, all of you who have a heart for our culture, for families, for unborn life, if we're not willing to step up and defend life, Who is? That responsibility is on us, and that's a real responsibility. So I would encourage you to reach out. This is Kim, by the way. Kim is our office manager at Life Defense Fund. She's right here, and if you call Life Defense Fund, Kim's most likely going to answer the phone, and she's been a great help at coordinating anybody who calls, get you out there, to really just educate the people. Right now what we're trying to do is put these flyers in the hands of people at the circulator level. We've heard so many stories. This is another example. We had a gentleman call just the other day. His name is Pat. Is Pat here, by the way? Pat said he might stop by. I don't. Oh, hey, okay, yeah. So, do you mind if I share this story?
Fine.
Okay, thank you. So, Pat called the office, and he said that he was down at the farmer's market. Just going to is this thing working? So Pat was heading down to the farmer's market, and he was approached by one of these circulators. And, I don't know if you've been down to the farmer's market. It's super busy. There's a lot of hustle and bustle. There's a lot of people going on. And he was approached by one of these circulators. And Pat, what was your impression? Well, what did you think that they had for you to sign?
A petition to resist abortion.
Yeah, so Pat's impression, and Pat is not the only one, by the way. We've heard these stories in other places where the circulators will come up and they have people believe, in Pat's case and other people's case, that this was a petition against abortion. And so people are signing, pro-lifers in the state of South Dakota are signing these petitions because they think this is a petition against abortion. We've heard about it down in the Vermilion area too, in the Yankton area, in Rapid as well. And we've seen their signs too, by the way. I mean, they had one of their signs at the circulator table. At the very top of the sign, it said pro-life. That's how they advertise people to come over. Right below that, it said pro-family. Pro-life, pro-family. Then it said pro-choice. What is this all about? Nonetheless, they are misleading the people. And by the way, even if they do approach somebody with their petition, and at least the person knows that this is not a pro-life petition, that it's something other than that, they are not telling the people that this is late-term abortion. They're lying about that. They won't tell people that this overrides parents' rights, that it takes away protections for mothers, health and safety protection, that it would open the door to taxpayer-funded abortions. They're not telling people those things. That's why we need to be out there. We need to be on the front lines. We need to be doing what we can do to educate the people of this state. So we need you. We need you big time.